St. Peter's Square is an impressive sight. Rising out of the middle of Rome, Italy, it is the highlighted image for the Vatican City, itself a nation under the authoritative rule of the Pope and the center of the Catholic Church. With the grand dome of St. Peter's Basilica, fountains, and impressive statues of the Apostle Paul and Peter standing guard, it is wondered just how sad and angered these apostles, and even Christ himself, must feel at how this religion and its millions of followers have turned their faith so upside down in the centuries since the establishment of the one true church. One thing you'll notice when entering St. Peter's Square is the overwhelming number of vendors, beggars, and those trying to make a few dollars off of the many pilgrims who make their journey here each and every day. It's hard to go a few steps without being bombarded by those trying to sell some trinket or image of the Pope, or be followed by some elderly ladies who appear to be on their last leg, asking you to spare a few coins. Just the very sight, though, of an approaching law enforcement officer causes many of these individuals to scatter in a matter of seconds, and many of the decrepit old ladies suddenly straighten up and shuffle off with a new burst of energy. Many, including myself, wonder at the sight of all of this, in front of what is supposed to be one of the centers of religion on earth, all the exchange and desire for money and wealth, plus those who try to defraud their fellow man. Yet despite all these out amongst the square looking to take advantage of others to make money, a wise man sitting back there once reminded me that the real thieves were inside. Tonight I want to talk for a few moments about greed. We can look at this example of the Vatican City as just one example of many in which man has allowed their insatiable desire for earthly wealth to take hold of them. While many focus on what is going on outside St. Peter's Basilica, they neglect to see the fact that much of this structure is built on an underlying foundation of greed and materialism. One particular painting hanging inside the doors of St. Peter's is titled "The Altar of the Lie," and in it the painter depicts the biblical story of Ananias and Sapphira from Acts 5, verses 1 through 11. The painting shows Sapphira, after lying to Peter, falling to the ground before the apostle, while in the background we see two young men carry away the dead body of her husband, Ananias. Of course, we all recall the story about how this couple was punished by God for withholding money that they had promised to the apostles and to God. What is striking is that this painting is strategically placed next to the church treasury and is meant to remind the worshipers not to hold back from their giving to God. While a good lesson can be learned from this story, the motives behind this scare tactic is only meant to help increase the wealth of this church, not by persuading people to give with a sincere and honest heart, but by forcing them to give using fear. The amount of wealth built up by the Catholic Church is clearly seen by the endless supply of ancient art and artifacts accumulated in the Vatican Museum. Many times these gifts or indulgences were given in exchange for what they perceived to be forgiveness of sins, or by world rulers to gain favor with the Pope and the Catholic Church. It's easy to see from a biblical standpoint just how wrong this idea of a church accumulating wealth beyond measure is. Likewise, it's easy to see how Christ or the apostles would feel about their likenesses and images being used in such a manner. In fact, many times they spoke on such topics, condemning those who fall victim to greed and worldly desires. Many religious bodies today would do well to heed to the example of Christ in Matthew 21, verse 12, who entered into the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling items to use in sacrifices. Will we as a church or a people ever be satisfied with what we have? If the answer is no, then we are gripped in the vice of greed and its twin sister, materialism. To be materialistic is to take an interest exclusively, chiefly, or excessively in the material or bodily necessities or comforts of life. To be greedy is to never have enough. But is it possible to be a believer and a materialist at the same time? I'm sure it could be, but it is not possible to be a committed, growing believer with divided priorities. Money is God's great rival for our hearts. Jesus said in Luke 16, verse 13, No man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The love of money and the things it can buy makes us greedy for more, no matter how much we have. As Scripture teaches us, whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10. Consider the story of the rich young ruler in Matthew 19, verses 16 through 26. When faced with the final choice to sell his possessions and give to the poor, the ruler went away grieving, because even though he owned much, he was not able to keep from wanting to hold to what he had, even though by doing so he was promised by Christ himself to have treasure in heaven if he would only heed to his advice and turn away from his desire for earthly wealth and money. Have you noticed tonight that what we're talking about is a love affair with money? Love of money will impede our growth to maturity because it keeps us from loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Greed results in displacing the one who has the right to be king and in sole control of our lives. That is why greed is called idolatry in Colossians 3, verse 5. But how do we push aside this worldly desire of greed? Let's look at just a few quick ways. First of all, we should make it our goal to please God. Luke 12, verse 31 tells us to seek his kingdom, and all these things will be given unto us. We seek God's kingdom when we live in obedience to him and are involved in his interests. For where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. Luke 12, verses 32 through 34. Second, we use money to build a treasure in heaven. The accumulation of money to be spent on things and pleasures should not be our goal. Proverbs tells us to not wear ourselves out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. Cast but a glance at riches, for they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Proverbs 23, verses 4 and 5. The contrast here is between the pursuit of earthly riches that can be lost and a heavenly treasure that is secure for eternity. God gives us money to share with those who don't have it. He allows us to give so others will hear the gospel message and support the work of God's kingdom. Giving back to the Lord is also a way of saying thank you to him for his love and care. It demonstrates where our hearts are, and these are ways of being rich toward God. Third, contentment is a care for greed. Consider Paul's advice to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 through 9. Godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out. Be content with what we have. The desire for money and possessions leads to all kinds of sin. It causes us to compromise our ethical standards. Note in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, that the money is the root of all evil. It only leads to faithlessness and sorrow. And finally, we have to change our outlook, perspective, and pursuits. In other words, change our attitude when it comes to material wealth and the riches of this world. 1 Timothy 6, 11 and 12. We are to flee from all this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Giving to the Lord for the expansion of his kingdom breaks the iron grip that money can have on our lives. When we give, it increases our faith because we experience the effect our generosity can have on others. They thank God for what he has used us to do. This stimulates us to more generosity and helps make us good role models for other believers. Are those I mentioned earlier tonight, the ones in the courtyard, outside the Vatican, or the ones inside, good role models when it comes to generosity or how to be good stewards? Remember as we end tonight, money is not bad, possessions are not bad. They only become evil when they become our idols, the gods that we give our lives to. Money is yet another of one of God's great rivals. If you have a need to come forward tonight, the invitation is extended to you. Whether you want to devote your life to Christ tonight or are already a Christian and have in some way stumbled or desire the prayers of the church, you have that opportunity to come forward tonight.